By the time the corridor lights snap on, most of the men are already awake, staring at concrete ceilings, waiting for a day that will look almost identical to yesterday. This is the routine inside the United States Penitentiary Administrative Maximum Facility, better known as ADX Florence, located in southern Colorado and often described as the most secure federal prison in America. Since opening in 1994, ADX has housed inmates considered the highest security risks in the federal system, including organized crime leaders, terrorism convicts, and inmates who committed violence inside other prisons. A typical day here is built around control, isolation, and predictability, structured to limit movement, reduce contact, and prevent communication that could threaten staff or other inmates. Most prisoners spend at least 22 to 23 hours each day alone in single-occupancy cells, designed to minimize interaction and eliminate opportunities for coordinated misconduct. The morning begins early, usually around 5 a.m., when lights turn on automatically and the first formal count of the day is conducted by correctional officers. During count, officers walk past each cell, visually confirming every inmate's presence and condition, ensuring that no one has attempted self-harm or tampered with security fixtures overnight. Silence dominates the tier, broken only by the sound of boots on concrete and the metallic echo of keys and electronic doors cycling through secured positions. Breakfast is delivered directly to each cell through a narrow slot in the solid steel door, preventing physical contact between inmates and staff. Meals are standardized and controlled, typically consisting of basic items like cereal, bread, fruit, or hot trays depending on the day's menu within Bureau of Prisons guidelines. Inmates eat alone, seated at fixed concrete desks attached to the wall, with furniture molded from poured concrete to prevent dismantling or weaponization. Communication between cells is heavily restricted, though some inmates attempt to speak through vents or plumbing systems, despite monitoring designed to detect such efforts. After breakfast trays are collected, another count may follow, reinforcing the rhythm of surveillance that defines daily life inside the facility. For many inmates, the next several hours are spent reading, writing letters, or reviewing legal documents, often the only meaningful activities available inside the confined space. Books and materials must be approved, and access to media is limited, with some inmates allowed controlled television programming depending on housing status and behavior level. Movement outside the cell is rare and tightly scheduled, determined by classification level within ADX's step-down program designed to reward sustained compliance. Those in the most restrictive units remain in near-total isolation, while others who demonstrate consistent rule adherence may earn limited privileges over time. If recreation is scheduled that day, the inmate is handcuffed through the food slot before the cell door is opened, following a precise, rehearsed security protocol. Officers escort the inmate down the corridor, sometimes alone, sometimes alongside others separated by distance, ensuring no physical contact occurs during transit. Recreation does not resemble a traditional yard. Instead, it often takes place in individual concrete enclosures, sometimes described as outdoor cages. These enclosures allow exposure to fresh air and a view of the sky, but little else, reinforcing separation even during designated exercise periods. Time outside the cell may last about an hour, depending on staffing levels, security concerns, and the inmate's disciplinary record. But even that limited freedom can be suspended without warning if intelligence suggests heightened risk inside the institution. Inside the cell, inmates have access to a sink with timed water flow, a stainless steel toilet, and limited personal property governed by strict inventory rules. Every item is accounted for, from pencils to legal papers, and officers conduct periodic searches to detect contraband or unauthorized alterations. Mid-morning often passes without conversation, as inmates adapt to routines that prioritize predictability over variation. Psychological services are available, though contact is typically conducted through the cell door or in controlled settings with restraints, depending on housing unit. Mental health evaluations are part of the institutional structure, particularly given the documented effects of prolonged isolation on some individuals. But access does not necessarily mean engagement, and not every inmate chooses to participate in available programming. By late morning, another formal count interrupts whatever routine has formed, reinforcing that time inside ADX is measured by institutional checkpoints rather than personal milestones. Lunch is delivered in the same manner as breakfast, through secured slots, minimizing direct exposure and maintaining physical barriers at all times. The design of the facility itself supports this separation, with remote-controlled doors and surveillance systems reducing the need for close proximity. Few people outside ever see these routines firsthand, and fewer still understand how repetition shapes the psychology of confinement. Afternoons can stretch longer than mornings, especially for inmates without recreation scheduled or programming assignments approved. Some inmates work within the housing unit, performing limited tasks such as cleaning or maintaining order under supervision, though opportunities are restricted. Participation in educational or rehabilitative programs depends heavily on security classification and demonstrated behavior over extended periods. The step-down program, unique within the Bureau of Prison System, outlines incremental movement toward less restrictive conditions for qualifying inmates. But progress through those phases can take years, and setbacks can return an inmate to more restrictive housing without public attention. Mail delivery typically occurs once per day, subject to screening procedures that review correspondence for prohibited content or coded communication. Letters are often the only sustained connection inmates maintain with the outside world, aside from monitored phone calls granted under specific conditions. Phone privileges are limited and earned, with calls closely supervised and recorded in accordance with federal policy. By mid-afternoon, the controlled quiet of the housing unit becomes routine again, punctuated only by scheduled movements and mechanical door sounds. Another count follows, ensuring accountability before evening procedures begin, a pattern repeated multiple times every 24 hours. Dinner trays arrive through the same narrow opening, closing the cycle of meal delivery that defines the structure of each day. After trays are retrieved, some inmates watch approved television programming, while others continue reading or exercising within the confines of their cell. Physical exercise inside the cell might consist of push-ups, pacing, or bodyweight routines developed to manage restlessness in a limited environment. As evening approaches, the facility transitions into nighttime protocol, but the structure does not loosen. Lights remain controlled by the institution, and although dimmed, they do not allow complete darkness within most units. Before the final night count, officers again verify each inmate's presence, condition, and cell integrity. As midnight passes, the building does not sleep, and neither does the system that governs it. Overnight staff conduct additional counts at irregular intervals, sometimes every 30 minutes, depending on housing unit and security assessment. Officers rely on flashlights and observation panels, confirming movement or breathing without opening doors or engaging directly, unless required. These checks are designed to prevent self-harm, assault attempts, or tampering with fixtures that could compromise security. Even in the quietest hours, surveillance cameras record continuously, feeding into monitoring stations staffed around the clock. Inside the cell, sleep is often fragmented, shaped by institutional lighting, noise, and the awareness of constant observation. Some inmates adjust over time, structuring their rest around predictable disruptions rather than resisting them. Others struggle, reporting insomnia or difficulty maintaining consistent sleep cycles in prolonged isolation. By early morning, the cycle begins again with institutional lighting and the first formal count of the new day. This repetition is intentional, reinforcing control through structure rather than improvisation. But structure alone does not define daily life. Classification status influences how much variation an inmate may experience. ADX Florence operates multiple housing units, including highly restrictive control units and step-down units, offering incremental privileges. Movement between these units depends on sustained compliance, documented behavior, and periodic reviews by institutional staff. These reviews examine disciplinary history, participation in programming, and overall adjustment to confinement conditions. However, advancement is not automatic, and inmates can remain in restrictive housing for extended periods. Few outside the system understand how long those evaluations can take or how narrow the margins for progress often are. Throughout the morning, case managers and counselors conduct administrative duties, including reviewing files and preparing documentation. Direct interaction with inmates may occur at cell doors, with conversations conducted through secure openings under supervision. These exchanges typically address legal matters, classification reviews, or procedural questions rather than informal discussion. Educational programming, where available, is often delivered through written materials rather than traditional classroom settings. Inmates pursuing coursework complete assignments inside their cells and submit materials for review under controlled procedures. Opportunities for work assignments exist, but are limited compared to lower security federal facilities. Some inmates may clean common areas within the housing unit under escort, while others assist in controlled administrative tasks. Every movement requires coordination, radio communication, and documented authorization before a door is remotely released. Officers carry out these routines according to standardized protocols designed to reduce unpredictability. Midday counts continue at scheduled intervals, reinforcing the principle that accountability is continuous, not occasional. Healthcare services operate within similar constraints, with medical staff evaluating inmates under strict security procedures. Appointments are scheduled in advance, and inmates are restrained and escorted to examination areas when movement is authorized. Emergency responses follow rehearsed procedures, prioritizing safety while addressing medical or psychological needs. Mental health professionals monitor individuals identified as higher risk, conducting regular assessments through secure interactions. The long-term effects of isolation have been the subject of litigation and public debate, prompting periodic policy reviews within the Bureau of Prisons. Still, daily practice inside the facility remains grounded in risk management and incident prevention. As afternoon approaches, some inmates prepare legal filings, particularly those pursuing appeals or post-conviction relief. Access to legal materials is structured but protected under federal guidelines, recognizing inmates' right to court access. Requests for documents or research support must follow formal channels, often involving written submissions reviewed by staff. But not every request is approved, and delays are common, adding another layer to the rhythm of confinement. Recreation periods, when scheduled, occur individually, preventing group assembly even in outdoor enclosures. Weather in southern Colorado can limit access, especially during winter months when temperatures drop significantly. On those days, recreation may occur indoors in similarly enclosed spaces designed to maintain separation. Some inmates use that time for structured exercise routines developed over years of confinement. Others simply stand beneath open sky, a rare reminder of space beyond concrete walls. By late afternoon, administrative duties wind down, but the security structure does not relax. Counts continue, meals are distributed, and movement remains controlled according to written policy. Disciplinary procedures also operate within this framework, addressing rule violations through formal hearings. Sanctions can include loss of privileges, reduced property allowances, or reassignment to more restrictive housing. These decisions are documented and subject to review, though reversal is uncommon without substantial evidence. As evening settles, the institutional environment grows quieter again, but it is not static. Behind each steel door, individuals adapt differently to the same constraints. Some maintain strict personal routines to impose a sense of order on repetitive days. Others withdraw, limiting engagement with available programs or communication opportunities. Few people outside the facility see how these choices accumulate over months and years. And yet, the structure persists, unchanged by individual preference. When the final evening count concludes, the institution resets for another overnight cycle. Security staff rotate shifts, surveillance continues, and the building remains fully operational. For inmates, the distinction between weekday and weekend carries little practical meaning. Holidays pass with modified menus or brief acknowledgments, but the core routine remains intact. Each 24-hour period blends into the next, measured less by calendar dates than by counts and controlled movements. But within that predictability, small variations can carry significant consequences. A missed count, a denied request, or a minor infraction can alter housing status for months. And what appears from the outside as monotony can, inside, determine the trajectory of confinement. As the lights dim once more, the cycle appears complete. Yet by the time morning returns, the same structure will begin again, precisely as designed. Before dawn returns again, another count confirms what the institution already expects. Every door secured, every inmate accounted for, every routine intact. Over time, that repetition becomes the defining feature of confinement at ADX Florence, shaping behavior more than any single rule ever could. A full 24 hours inside is not marked by dramatic events, but by controlled predictability enforced without interruption. The architecture reinforces that control, with thick concrete walls, remote-operated steel doors, and sightlines engineered to prevent unsupervised interaction. Even the windows are angled to show only sky and mountains, limiting any view of surrounding buildings or other inmates. This design reduces visual stimulation and minimizes opportunities for communication across housing units. Inside each cell, the environment remains constant from one day to the next. Concrete surfaces, fixed furnishings, and limited personal property create a space defined more by function than comfort. The Bureau of Prisons maintains that such conditions are necessary for inmates deemed too dangerous for other federal facilities. Many individuals housed here were transferred after assaults, escape attempts, or leadership roles in organized criminal activity. Others arrived following convictions in high-profile terrorism or national security cases. Placement at ADX is not typically the starting point of a federal sentence. Instead, it often follows documented incidents within lower security institutions. That history influences how each 24-hour cycle unfolds, even if the daily routine appears identical across cells. Inmates assigned to control units experience the most restrictive conditions. Those progressing through the step-down program may earn increased out-of-cell time over extended periods of compliance. But advancement requires documented behavior without serious infractions for sustained stretches, sometimes measured in years. Any disciplinary violation can pause or reverse that progress. As days accumulate, time is tracked not just by counts and meals, but by review cycles and classification reports. Case managers periodically evaluate institutional conduct, reviewing incident reports and participation records. These internal reviews determine whether an inmate remains in current housing or advances to less restrictive phases. Yet the standard for advancement remains high, reflecting the facility's underlying mission. Staff training emphasizes vigilance, consistency, and adherence to procedure. Officers operate under detailed guidelines governing movement, restraints, and communication. Every escort involves coordination between multiple staff members. Hand restraints, waist chains, and controlled positioning are routine for movements outside the cell. These measures are not improvised responses, but standardized safeguards. Within that framework, interactions between staff and inmates tend to be brief and procedural. Conversations focus on instructions, compliance, and documented requests. Personal familiarity is limited by design. Medical and mental health services continue operating within these constraints. Providers must balance patient care with security requirements unique to the environment. Some inmates adapt by structuring their day around reading, writing, or exercise. Others rely heavily on correspondence to maintain a sense of connection beyond the facility. Mail remains screened for prohibited content, and delays are common due to security review. Phone calls, when authorized, occur under monitoring and time limits. Family contact can influence behavior reviews, particularly within the step-down program. But access to those privileges depends on sustained compliance. Critics of long-term isolation have raised concerns through lawsuits and public advocacy. Court cases over the years have challenged aspects of confinement conditions at ADX. In response, the Bureau of Prisons has implemented certain procedural adjustments, including expanded mental health evaluations. Yet the core structure of the 24-hour cycle remains largely intact. Morning counts, meal delivery, recreation periods, and repeated verification continue without deviation. For staff, routine provides operational stability in a high-risk environment. For inmates, that same routine defines the boundaries of daily existence. Weekends differ little from weekdays. Seasonal changes are visible only through narrow windows. National events, elections, or cultural milestones rarely alter the institutional rhythm. Inside ADX, the calendar has less influence than policy. Over years, the accumulation of identical days becomes its own experience. Some former inmates have described the challenge of adjusting to environments with less structure after release or transfer. Others remain inside for decades, their routines anchored to counts and controlled movement. From the outside, a single day may appear uneventful. From the inside, each hour is regulated by procedures designed to eliminate uncertainty. Even emergencies are addressed through rehearsed responses. Alarms trigger coordinated movement by trained teams, restoring order before routine resumes. What distinguishes one 24-hour period from another is rarely visible to the public. Institutional reports record infractions, reviews, and procedural updates. But the broader pattern persists, steady and deliberate. As night settles once again, the lights dim but never disappear entirely. Security systems remain active, surveillance uninterrupted. Inmates lie inside concrete rooms identical to those beside and above them. The next morning will begin, as the last one ended. Counts will confirm presence. Meals will pass through steel slots. Doors will open and close according to written authorization. And another full day inside ADX Florence will pass, measured not by freedom of movement, but by the absence of it. If this story kept you watching, the next one will stay with you even longer. Subscribe for more real prison documentaries.